Welcome to Tales from the Trenches Tuesdays. Today it is my absolute honor to have Luis Diez with us.
Here's a story of a fundraiser who was launching his very own web show. Each episode is very short due to edits, so it can really flow. Here's a story of a podcast guest star who was busy raising money of their own. They were each great in their own way, fundraising in the zone. Till the one day when Jack asked a guest to join him, and they knew it was much more than a jest, that these guests must somehow form a resource. That's the way they all became the podcast guests. The podcast guests, the podcast guests. That's the way they became the podcast guests.
Luis advises nonprofits in annual fund development, digital fundraising, and engagement strategies. He's the founder of the Donor Participation Project and the Annual Fund Toolkit. Previously, he taught at the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, was executive director of annual giving at Muhlenberg College, and director of the annual fund and development business operations at the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra. In those roles, he led teams that created growth in number of donors and dollars raised through a model he calls the Sustainable Revenue Engine. Of varied interests, Luis holds an MBA and a PhD in business admin from Universidad Rey Juan Carlos in Spain, and an MM in music performance from the University of Tennessee. His thesis applied neural networks to predict economic performance indicators. He's also published articles on the investment value of musical instruments, edited peer-reviewed papers exploring applications for economic theories of legitimacy, and been featured in the music business section of the College Music Society's journal. Wow, that is quite the resume.
So just 2 months school, essentially.
Do you often find that sometimes boards are self-appointed fundraising experts? They may not have been fundraisers themselves, but everyone seems to think that they know how to fundraise. And I think that it's a skill that's honed over many, many years of practice.
I mean, I would trust your perspective much more than mine here. Yes, generally. I mean, obviously, agreed with that. I think that fundraising is a profession like marketing that where everybody thinks they're an expert. No, so you usually trust your doctor to recommend the treatment, but everybody's second guessing a fundraiser. A parallel aspect of that is that the strength of the volunteer leadership, both at the board level and in other organizations, is critical. And I feel, I don't know, this is anecdotal maybe, or a gut feeling that has kind of eroded societally. Like, there are fewer really good volunteer leaders. You know, there's just people that want to show up and not make anybody angry. Which is kind of a problem, because when you have the person that's the self-appointed fundraising expert and is saying you have to do more bake sales, you need some backup.
Right. It's funny because they never second guess a CFO, right, who has their accounting designation. Why are we investing? Why are you doing this? But when it comes to the fundraising department, there's always a million questions. Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing this? And I find it very interesting to kind of look at.
And related, I do find that CFOs tend to push a view of ROI that's short-term. So, most are looking at the investment that you make last year, pay off this year. And that's kind of a stretch. Whereas a monthly gift, I think everybody that will be on your podcast knows the data, but over a stretch of 3 to 5 years, somebody that's making a monthly credit card donation is usually 2 to 3 times as valuable than somebody that just makes one-time gifts, because a combination of they tend to stay on for longer and they tend to give a little bit more. And that's not even thinking that because they stayed on for longer, your development officer, the executive director can give them a call and is more likely to get a response. for a
Right.
major gift. So when I share this with CFOs and I have a little spreadsheet where I model this, that's news to lots. So anyhow, kind of the expertise and the perception of expertise is just a fun thing. I think, I don't know. I don't know how to fix that.
It's a challenge. It really is. So, fundraising has kind of been done off the side of someone's desk for quite some time, and it's evolved a little bit, but it certainly hasn't gotten to where I think that we need it to be. So where do you think fundraising is headed as a profession in kind of the next 5 or 10 years? Or if you were to have a crystal ball and say, I'm going to transport in like 100 years, what does fundraising look like then?
Hey, and that's a really good question. The Bureau of Employment, some federal U.S. Entity, predicts stronger than average growth for nonprofit fundraisers. So from that perspective, I think the future is bright. I think large legacy institutions may be seeing headwinds. I don't think they're going anywhere, but places like universities, and they're just facing many more pressures than they used to. I think that's a reality. What I'd like to see is, and we're actively trying to do this and help with this, is find many more smaller grassroots orgs that can unlock really significant growth by using these principles that are kind of just more attuned with our times, right? They're meeting people where they are, they're co-creating, they're asking people for their opinion, they're more communicating in better ways, and then, and still they're asking, aggressively for large gifts. So, I see what you see, I think, and then I have maybe a little bit of a dream of what might happen, but.
Well, yeah, I think there's definitely going to be a big change. And it's coming. It may not be as fast as we like, which is, the frustrating part.
Well, yeah, and societally, we're more divided in every way. I think approaching fundraising in this more community building way is kind of could heal a little bit. I don't have great expectations that we're going to change the course of civilization. But it brings a kind of a bigger mission to the work we do.
Mm-hmm. And, I think there's so many folks that, at least in Canada, the CRA, the Canadian Revenue Agency, always does statistics based on, the tax returns and things like that. And then they do surveys and, so they ask people, do you donate? And the proportion of people who say they donate is totally incongruous with the number of people who claim a tax receipt, a tax credit in Canada. But they may donate to the busker that's on the street, right? Like who's performing. They may give to, they may think of donating in another way. They may, bake a meal for a friend who's sick or something. And that's how they're choosing to be philanthropic. So I'm thinking
they may give out the line in a variety of ways to organizations that are not nonprofits. Well, speaking of trends, that's a trend that I'm interested in. I don't know if it's going to be important, but the trend toward more of the news outlets and content create informational venues to behave more like nonprofits. And there's actually nonprofit news organizations that are just, so they're not trying to fund themselves through ads necessarily, so like in the past, but they try to fund, they fundraise for their budget. So I think that would maybe improve the internet a little bit. This ad-driven kind of sense that we're being spied on all the time.
Random we are.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the things I love to ask on these interviews is, what is the best canvas, or in Canada we call it canvas, in the States you call it a solicitation or an ask.
Okay.
So what's the best ask that you were on, and what made it the best?
I ran this campaign where everybody told me like that it was really just a bad idea. And board members were, so I was a junior member of the team, and they were like, why have you been assigned to this? Does somebody hate you? And it was to plan the retirement of a professor, which if anybody has done these before, they're just really hard because everybody says, oh, people will give, and then they don't. And then you have a professor that's feeling really bad about this effort. Everybody looks bad. It's just ugly. So I approached it more like a mini campaign, and I got a committee going, and we had a secret phase. And we actually raised $500,000 in 6 months, and we had a goal of $1 million. So I think hopefully the lesson, if there's a lesson here, or maybe it was just dumb blind luck, but if there's a lesson is that a lot of the processes in traditional fundraising are about just fundamental, like I want to belong to something, and that's why committees work. And then when you do something with a regular basis, you just tend to feel more committed to it. That's just whatever you do. Lots of people fall in love with somebody at work just because they're seeing them all the time. There's some stat about that. It's kind of a inordinately high percentage.
Right.
So, and that you can take all of that. So everything doesn't need to look like a capital campaign, essentially, right? If you want to do major gifts, that we can be really more creative and take just the parts of what really work and leave out the parts that are not working so much. So,
so it's really that flexibility and being able to kind of pick and choose what's working and what isn't. Where so many times they're rigid in the thinking, right? You got to do it.
Exactly. This is an annual campaign, and all you can do are emails and letters,
Right.
Because that's the way it's done. So send everybody a letter telling them that this person is retiring, and you're done with it. So, I don't know, like the craft, the craft of fundraising, just that being creative with that.
Yeah. All right. So let's kind of flip it on its head for a second. We've all been on canvases or solicitations that have just gone off the rails. So tell me about one that was just a dog's breakfast.
I've never had somebody be insulted so other people have, right? So you make the ask, then you shut up. And I've heard stories but I've never had that. And even when they've said no, I've tried to keep curious about it and kind of just keep, finding out why. Like, was it a not now? Is it the wrong thing? Is it, I thought the relationship was at this stage, but actually I had been blind to the fact that their spouse is not really on board. Things like that. I did have like the one learning opportunity. Let's frame it, the US way. Everything is positive. The greatest learning opportunity that I had was a donor that went to my boss and said they actually requested to be taken off my portfolio because they didn't trust me to do the job.
Oh my goodness.
I know, it really hurt because, I realized I was pretty junior. I was afraid, but basically I was scared of a lot, just kind of answering, saying something wrong. So I was taking my sweet time, doing a lot of research, trying to be very careful. And that was coming across as I asked this person something and they're taking a week to be like, what's wrong with them? Instead of saying, hey, I'm looking into it. Let me give you a call tomorrow and find out more. Just kind of keep the connection going. Right. So, lesson learned. Speed of response is actually an indicator of correlated to trust. So you trust people more who respond quickly to you. And I found that also people who have businesses, the really good ones, you text them and they text right back, no matter how busy they are. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And even more so, if you don't have the answer, even texting someone saying, I don't have the answer, give me a couple days to go and find it, and then I'll get back to you, is better than waiting those couple of days and there's the silence and then coming and saying, okay, I finally got the answer. At least this way they know that you're on top of it and they appreciate that you're diligent.
So I learned that the hard way. Maybe if I'd worked with you, Jack, you would have taught me. But sometimes we just have to put our fingers into the electrical outlet to find out what's going on.
But Louis, I really just wanted to thank you for taking the time to be part of this podcast. If folks wanted to get hold of you or to learn more about the Donor Participation Project, how would they go about doing that?
It's pretty easy. Just I'm going to give you a web address, a URL. So it's join DPP. So JOIN and then DPP for Donor Participation Project. JoinDPP.com. And there's a sign up there. If you want to connect personally with me, please seek me out on LinkedIn, and I'd be excited to connect with folks. Jack, I want to thank you for your persistence and for how easy you have made this interview. I wish we were all like that, and it's been absolutely wonderful. I've been kind of following you. I saw when you had Lynn Wester and Jim Langley, some folks that I really admire.
Yes.
And some kind of other folks that I didn't know about that are really interesting.
Thank you so much, Louis, and have a great weekend.
Thanks so much.
Hi, folks. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button right here.